1, 2. Hey everybody, it's Laura. I'm going to try this a little differently today. I'm a little disorganized. I'd like to be a little more organized than I am today. So I'm just going to wing this. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. It's Holy Week this week, and I want to talk about that in regards to occupational therapy and why there would be a chance that why would I want to know about Holy Week as an occupational therapist? And are there conflicts of interest when we look at spirituality as a healthcare professional? I think it's a heated, disputed, a topic that I think we just kind of stay away from. And honestly, I think there's some obstruction around bringing spirituality into healthcare. Back in the 80s, I was exposed to the New Age movement, of which now I'm hearing is kind of butchered through the political stuff and infiltrated with all kinds of weird things. But I just want to mention a little bit about how we hear a lot about angels and energy and Reiki and spirit guides and all that kind of stuff. And I know in our profession where there are people that are bringing some of those topics in or touching on that, craniosacral therapy. How does that fit? And does that belong in our profession? I'd like to address that. And I figured because it is Holy Week, what a perfect time to talk about and bring in the spiritual piece and how appropriate it might be as therapists to address that. It's an area that I'm actually rather passionate about, but I'm very, very careful about it. Because I feel like in our field of occupational therapy, we have a theoretical framework of which we function from. And in previous videos, way back when, I talked about performance components, because that's such an important part of us as occupational therapists, is we look at performance components. A client is referred to us and we evaluate, and we look at how that person is functioning, where do they want to go in life, and we look at various performance components, whether they're physical, emotional, mental, or social, and we evaluate. And if we feel like there's some issues with the performance components, if we have some good matches based on our activity analysis of treatment of activities, then we can form a treatment plan and help that client. In another video, I talked about the Native American medicine wheel, which I've spent a lot of time studying. Back when I worked at Apollo College in Phoenix many years ago, I ran across some OT literature. I did not, unfortunately, cite the source at the time. But they had taken a basic medicine wheel concept in regards to occupational therapy. And I loved it. At the time, I was working up in South Dakota with some Lakota Indians, and so it made a lot of sense to me. But very basically, looking at the Native medicine wheel is just simply, we're looking at 4 different components: physical, mental, emotional, and what I like to call spiritual or social, or that part of us that connects out with others. That's how simply I'm looking at it. And in our OT literature, we do talk about the significance that cultural and spiritual implications can have on the health of somebody. I think, a classic example is of like a spiritual kind of an issue is somebody who's heartbroken. Let's say somebody died or loss of a relationship, and you feel heartsick. I think so many of us can understand what that means, but we are less understanding of how that impacts us, like physically. We tend to go to the doctor if we have like heart pains, and here's the pill, and that should take care of your heart issues. But how much does it take care of the fact that there is the sorrow and the grief in missing that person? And are there things that we can do to help somebody in more of a spiritual realm, if that's even appropriate. I think so many people, most people, acknowledge some kind of prayer or some kind of connection with something other than us. Spirit, God, Father. There are different terms that different peoples throughout time and cultures have called upon God or Creator or Abba, but it's still the recognition of calling out to something else. And there's two ways of doing it. You can call out to God on behalf of good, or in a more darker sense, and I think that this is where like dark witches and satanic cults kind of fit in. We're trying to hurt others. I've worked with people who have been exposed to satanic cult abuse. So as an occupational therapist, when I have a client come to me, I at least need to be aware of these different kinds of issues. And I have to be very careful about what are my issues or what are my beliefs or perspectives, and how is that different than my clients? Because I'm there to treat my client and help support my client in their framework, their perspective, not mine. For example, I did 9 months worth of internship as part of my schooling before I became an occupational therapist. And the first 3 months, I had the very fortunate opportunity of spending that time in Hawaii. Well, in Hawaii, there's a lot of Japanese people. Now, I was raised in a very Christian, Judeo-Christian environment. And here I am way, not halfway around the world, but, geographically very far. And here are these people who are very different than me. And I went in to treat this client. And when I was done, she bowed to me. And so she was showing me respect in her tradition. I'm getting goosebumps. She was showing me respect in her tradition. And who am I to come in and say, no, you shouldn't bow? Or I feel as an occupational therapist, it is my responsibility to learn about the different cultures and different cultural perspectives and honor that. And so that's kind of what I want to explore a little more today. My husband and I were doing some research on this last night, and we decided to go, I think, kind of a fun route. So I've kind of jumped right into this topic. I want to do a little more of an intro, and then we're going to do some lab work. In my therapy sessions, I tend to go through themes, and of late I've been focusing a lot on sound and music, and so I want to continue on with that. And I've asked my husband, Kevin, to help me with this. He would prefer to stay out of the picture, but he is an exceptional mimic, and he can really replicate sound, and so he's going to help us out with some of this, but in a little bit. And then let me just share it with you now. And at the end, I always like to do a little quiet time. We kind of build in our sessions and we calm down at the end, because self-regulation is such a huge issue. And what I decided to do today, just to kind of forewarn you so you can get ready for this, I've actually chosen a video from YouTube. It's about 6 minutes. So in anticipation of, as we've done in the past, I encourage you to, when we get to that point, get yourself in a comfortable position. So much of what I do in my work is working with sensory systems. And we tend to exaggerate the sensory mechanisms in order to really give our brains some good food, some good neurological information. How do we do that? Is with sensory information. So if you know yourself and you prefer deep pressure, I would encourage you to maybe find a place on your couch, cover up with a blanket, get comfortable, maybe sit in a rocking chair for this particular video at the end. I want you to be able to hear, and you can see the images, but also be opened. So part of this about sound is about listening and trying to take that judgment hat off and just listen. Last week I touched on vibration, and certainly with my husband's drum kit, there's so much vibration. But sounds have vibration. And I want you to be affected by what we do, certainly in this lab portion of my sessions. So the classroom is kind of the verbal explaining some things, but it's really important to me, especially as an occupational therapist, for you to actually experience and do things. It's one thing to read a book, but that's one of the reasons why I spent so much time with Native Americans, is because we were doing things and it was having an impact. Like God's Spirit has an impact. I was raised Christian, and when I married, I became Catholic. But I've spent a lot of time with Lakota Indians. I work and have lived on the Navajo reservation. I've spent a lot of time with Tibetan monks, Bunpo. There might be some Tibetan monks who are watching these videos with you. You may not know that, but I've got a lot of Tibetan friends. And I can relate to them. But I'm at least open to the fact that they are a bit different. Their training, their background has been different. And as an occupational therapist, I need to be open to that, because what if I were to have a Tibetan monk or a Tibetan come to me and need some kind of treatment? Am I going to tell, and I have worked actually on the Tibetan monks. Way cool. But there are certain cultural things you don't really do, you know? Kind of strange. So let me reel myself back in, because I guess I'm trying to emphasize the cultural variations that we have in the world. And most people, I think, acknowledge some kind of spiritual tradition. And in the past, a different video was on routines and needs and values. Most people maintain some kind of spiritual practice. And I think a huge reason why I'm emphasizing this so much is because we're living in a time right now where there's a lot of strife. And I have worked in mental health. I've had mental health issues in my family. I believe I'm sane, but, my anxiety. What have I done to treat myself? What has been helpful to me, personally and then professionally? And it's through the spirit and the energy work, shamanism, recognizing that I am a spiritual being, and how praying and doing spiritual practices, ceremonies, has been helpful to me. This week is Holy Week. Not that I, as an occupational therapist, am going to do confession with somebody. You go to a priest for that. But it is an activity, a spiritual activity that can help us in our own mental health and our own functioning. It is a tool that certainly Christians use to help them in our own soul searching, in our own mental health. I'm hesitating here. I just want to make a point about how, yes, I was raised Christian, and I have exposed myself to other traditions. But I'm going to have that piece, I'm going to emphasize more when Kevin comes in. I'm not even that versed biblically. My husband's more versed biblically. But there's a reason why peoples celebrate things like Easter or Passover every year as a regular routine of kind of purging old stuff of the year and in trying to help evolve and be a better person, if that makes sense. And as an occupational therapist, my role is to help improve functioning with somebody else. Taking it just a little step farther here, and then we'll move on. Because it is Holy Week, I know that there are a lot of peoples who, I mentioned already, prayer, but recognize the importance of fasting. And that is a physical kind of a strategy to help with our spiritual needs and spiritual issues. As a Catholic, one of the things that's emphasized is almsgiving, to be charitable. I think most people want to be good people and want to help others. Is there anything wrong with that? And in this time, as you guys have all known and witnessed my process, yes, I offer my services, but there's times where I've needed help too. And it's very humbling, very humbling. I wonder and suspect why we as a country have had to go through what we've had to, or our whole world. It's been very humbling. That we kind of need to reel ourselves in a little bit and do some soul searching, and how am I treating myself? How am I treating others? And I believe the spiritual path can help us with that. And I believe it is an important part of who we are. Most people recognize that. And according to the medicine wheel, 1/4 of us is spent towards spiritual, social pursuits in order to keep a balance. You know, the medicine wheel, it's a circle. You know, we want to have a balanced, healthy perspective. And having some kind of spiritual perspective can be helpful. Some people more than others. Obviously, for me, it's very important. And if I were to go in and treat a client, like I mentioned the Tibetan monks, obviously spirituality is very important for them too. And I can relate to them at that level. I lived on the Navajo reservation. I needed to learn about some of their spiritual traditions in order to treat my Navajo clients appropriately. So for me, I think it is very appropriate as an occupational therapist to be aware of the common theme around spirituality, but know that there's individual differences. And then I guess just one other point to really make about this is what happens when we do mess up, or we act badly, or we behave badly. And we all do it. I do it. I go to confession, you know. There's things about me I'm a little less happy about, you know, so I know that those are things to work on. But there's a word called redemption, and I don't know how much it's more of a Catholic term, but I think it's the concept is a little more universal. What happens? What do we do when someone behaves badly? Do we just throw them away? Maybe they're trying to say something. I mean, I'm not going to get into that so much right now. What happens when somebody, in the Catholic term, sins, commits adultery or kills? Or what do we do when we behave badly? And that's where I think the spiritual part comes in. Or like forgiveness. Where does forgiveness come in? I think as occupational therapists or as health professionals, I think we need to be sensitive to these issues and adjust accordingly. If spirituality is important for my client, it may be an area that I may want to emphasize a little more in my treatment plan. Maybe. That would be where the artistry comes in. Because I am concerned about mental health. And I believe that as OTs, as health professionals, we can guide our clients and be conscious of the spiritual implications. And that's probably about how far I really want to go with that. I did pull up a couple of, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. I've got 2 iPads going. I'm going to show you the, yay, I did it! Just bear with me. I'm just going to go through a little, okay, adjustment here. So, just as far as some definitions of terms, redemption, and this is from, this is the dictionary, Google dictionary, the action of saving or being saved from sin, error, or evil. I'm not going to get really any more into that, but I think it's an issue for us as people. So I wanted to point it out. We were talking about some of like the main religions of the world and all, and I just wanted to point out a couple things here. This is the Wikipedia, that there are these, I want to point out that there are different peoples throughout time, different geographies, that still maintain a connection with some type of spiritual force, whether it's Christian, Hindu, Judaism, Islam. I'm hearing a lot of negativity about Islam these days. And, it's like I've looked and it's like, according to what I'm reading online, well, I think that the basic idea is to do good. Redemption is achieved by being a Muslim and doing no action that would forfeit one's identification with Islam, being of sincere faith and of doing virtuous actions. Muslim sinners need only to turn to a merciful God in repentance. So for me, there is this, at least some kind of, what's the word I want? Forward motion in trying to address some of these issues. I'm going to go ahead and put this on the screen. And so what I've asked Kevin to do, as I adjust this iPad, I'm going to, thank you, Lori Tappan. I've asked Kevin to go ahead and share with us some different cultural, can't seem like I'm unable to talk and adjust at the same time here. Excuse me, so if you all would just bear with me for a moment.